Why do we all love Harry Potter so much? The obsession was real. These films had kids walking around with backpacks and lunch boxes and sorting themselves into wizarding houses that they still have a strong alliance with now, well into their 30s. When the first film was released in 2001, according to Warner Brothers, 60% of the audience was under the age of 17. And when Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out in 2011, 56% of the audience was over the age of 25. The Harry Potter series is the perfect example of when the audience grows with you. But how did they do that? You know, making an entire generation stick around for 7 films spread over the span of 10 years? Well, for one, the conflict can be universally understood. Despite the complexities and intricacies of the wizarding world, it's an underdog story. In the first movie, we see a kid that's misunderstood and rejected by those around him. But he finds out he's special and a rock star in the wizarding world. Keep in mind, kids around the world are watching this movie at an age where they all feel like they're being locked in a closet, with their true potential being kept under the wraps. We all want to believe that that's who we'd be if the conditions were right. Moreover, he's just the kind of guy you want nice things to happen to. You can't help but root for the guy. Relatability is one thing, but a huge factor is that these 7 movies were spread over 10 years apart. The reason a lot of us enjoy watching web series or franchises is because of the associations we build with every element of the story and characters. The longer you let these things cook, the greater the magnitude of the reward. The super long timelines is what makes those payoffs extra special. The fact that you've seen Neville Longbottom be a bitch all these years makes it so much more special when you see him slay a Horcrux. But I'm older now, why do I still care about magic? Because magic was never the point. Magic was a tool used to tell a much larger story about things that matter to all of us in the Muggle world. The world built in these movies is just as messed up and tragic as the one we live in. Only difference is, this one has magic, so it's kinda exciting. They sneak the stuff in the way you sneak a kid medicine disguised as candy. The systems of wealth, race, human nature, or wizard nature in this case, are designed just as they are in the real world. Let's take a deeper look into each film, seeing how it changed and evolved for a growing audience, in both age and number. Directing the first part of any mega franchise is no easy task. The director has to make some decisions and set a tone in the first movie that will likely stick around till the end. That is why the task of directing the first 2 films was given to Chris Columbus. When he signed the contract with Warner Brothers, he was already well established in his career, having directed blockbusters like Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire. He was the perfect choice to direct these films. Now you'd think the hardest part about directing a kids movie about magic is going to be the magic itself or the grandness you'd have to capture. No, it's the kids. Directing children is not easy, especially when there are hundreds of them. Apparently Chris lost about 15 pounds directing these 2 movies. But of course, all his experience working with young actors before came in handy, and soon he made his place among the kids. Even at the Harry Potter reunion, the cast had the greatest memories of him. It only goes to show how good he was at his job, not just as a filmmaker, but as a mentor, setting these kids up for a decade-long collaboration to come. Not to mention the excellent job he did setting up the characters and building the universe. You can't not want to be a part of Hogwarts watching these first 2 movies. If you look at the entire color palette of the films, you'll notice that it's all very vibrant. These inviting colors make you feel cozy and comfortable while you strap in for the wild journey these films are about to send you on. Obviously, the first film came with its own set of pressures, but when it took off and Chris proved his mettle, he could finally have fun with the second. Not that it became any easier though. Chris had to quit directing these movies because as rewarding as it sounds to direct a mega hit franchise, it comes with quite a set of pressures too. Chris said in an interview that he had to be on set 320 days in a year and was missing out on his own kids growing up. He stayed on though as a producer for the next film with Alfonso Cuarón taking his place. The third part is for sure the most stylized movie in the series. You'll notice that all the vibrant colors from the first 2 parts have been replaced by more grim and darker shades. The main characters are now being introduced to the darker side of the wizarding world. There's a potential serial killer on the loose, and there are dementors that are literally sucking up your soul. Warner Brothers took a big risk signing Alfonso for the third movie, keeping in mind that the last film he had directed was a super sexual road trip film whose name I cannot pronounce. But the risk paid off. Alfonso masterfully switched up the vibe of the film and showed that as beautiful as the wizarding world can be, it has its own set of horrors. The beauty and vibrance of the first 2 films served as a reference point as to how things should be. Normal. The film really started to lean into the neo-gothic aesthetic that we for some reason loved in the early 2000s. I mean, I remember watching this film and feeling genuinely scared. Harry has also grown emotionally, and this is the first time he actually feels a connection with his family. He learns about death, loss, and moving on. So naturally, the guy playing Harry is growing too. The cast later on told how Alfonso treated them less like kids and more like teenagers since, he wasn't around for the first 2 films. So just like the characters, the actors are figuring out who they are as well as they enter adulthood on a multi-million-dollar set. And Alfonso does a great job of guiding them through this transition, setting them up for the kind of serious work they're going to have to be doing soon. Mike Newell took on the next film, and he brought with him an energy that was very much needed at this point in the series. He is reported to have been very theatrical in the way he worked, and would even go as far as to injure his ribs trying to wrestle the Weasley twins just to show them how it's done. Now, many argue that it isn't the best part. I'm not saying it, but people are. I guess because we don't really get to see any action, at least till the very end. But that's not what this film is about. It really looks like they dedicated this one film in the series to just develop the characters and their relationships. I really feel like if you look at the series as one big movie, the fourth part exists to raise the stakes by showing us that the wizards you see battling a Dark Lord in the later films are just regular old teenagers. We see them lose sleep over the Yule Ball, Harry and Ron are following their romantic pursuits, and Hagrid goes on a little adventure of his own. Life is great, Hogwarts is alive. Coming after the grim events of the Prisoner of Azkaban, things are not that bad. Of course, there's this weird guy with the weird eye and that horrific dragon, but other than that, it's all good. And just when they thought this is going to be a normal year at school, they're faced with the tragedy of death. Harry's arch nemesis is born and nothing is going to be the same anymore. Again, if we look at the series as a whole, this is what you would call the midpoint, the point of no return if you will. Harry witnesses his friend dying in front of his eyes. From this moment on, Harry is no longer the boy who lived, but the boy with the giant responsibility on his shoulders. The fun but sometimes dangerous wizarding world that we've been seeing so far is now facing a fatal threat and is in grave danger. The whole chill aesthetic of the first half of the film also really helps to raise the intensity of the tragedy that strikes towards the end. It's not something you were expecting or even prepared for, just makes it hit harder in comparison. One thing that Mike Newell did quite great actually is giving life to Voldemort. He had a difficult task at hand. To actually introduce the villain that they'd been hyping up for 4 parts and giving that villain such an amazing introduction that his terror persists for the rest of the films is a big deal if you ask me. This sets us up perfectly for the next part. Now from here onwards, David Yates comes in and takes over the franchise, starting with the Order of the Phoenix. At this point, there are millions of fans around the world and it is as big as it gets. And the stress, well, it's getting to the actors too. Emma Watson was really considering not coming back for the 5th film, but we're glad she did, even though it probably cost her a lot. Up here. No, but seriously guys, if your job is costing you your mental health, it can never be more important than your well-being. Unless you're in a Harry Potter film. Jokes, guys, jokes. Seriously, take care of yourselves. It's definitely not just a kids movie anymore. Take a look at the color palette of this film and compare it with the first 2 movies. The 5th part is definitely the most happening part of the franchise, and if we put it on the timeline of a traditional feature film, this part would be the falling action. The setup for a war basically. Remember how in the 4th part we mentioned Harry learning about death, loss and moving on? In this part he goes through grief, anger and develops a thirst for revenge. The death of Harry's godfather comes in with a massive realization that this is a war, and war has no rules. We get to explore themes of greed and politics in this film. A decent chunk of it is pretty much a courtroom drama where Harry is under trial for using magic in the presence of a muggle. That's why they hired David Yates. He really helped build the political atmosphere of the wizarding world. Harry has taken things into his own hands. He's used the Expelliarmus spell on Snape before, but this time it's a lot more aggressive. The main characters take their rebellion a step further by starting Dumbledore's army. The side-by-side comparison of both sides also scares the hell out of you. Like, these guys are gonna fight these guys until we hear Harry say this, of course.
But even though we've got a fight ahead of us, we've got one thing that Voldemort doesn't have.
Yeah?
Something worth fighting for.
This is also the film where we see Harry kiss for the first time, so in a way this part is all about acting on things and taking matters into your own hands. Then comes The Half-Blood Prince. I like to think of this film as the calm before the storm. This film runs massively on backstories. It's where Harry and we as an audience are starting to get some of the answers. I like to think of this film as Malfoy's film. We really get to see his character shine here. The fact that they were able to build even a little bit of empathy for him is outstanding. It is in this part where we stop seeing things in black and white and discover the grey area. Not everything is entirely good nor bad. The illusion of good and evil starts to fade away a bit when we start empathizing with Malfoy. Even though he has a wand pointed out at the most lovable character in the entire series, we still feel bad for the guy. And something inside Harry feels that too. Harry had it easy. He got into the right circle at the right time and made the right friends. Malfoy, on the other hand, had to break the cycles of evil that his family embraced. The audience has matured to the point for this transformation to actually make sense too. In a way, this film is also about trying to prove your worth, to show the world that you are brave, which is what we felt as well. Even Ron tries really hard to win that Quidditch game, trying to prove that he's not just a spare wheel. The first part of the Deathly Hallows has a lot of time spent away from Hogwarts. We immediately see a different landscape. In a way, the comfort of the school is gone, and it's like our heroes are out in the open, vulnerable to pretty much any sort of attack. The actors are now pretty much adults here and are having to do some serious acting. And the scenes, well, they really demand it. With all the negative impact the Horcruxes are having on the trio's mind, not to mention the overall trauma they're having to battle through because of, well, everything. But despite all of it, Ron and Hermione finally kiss. Took them 7 movies to do it, but they did it, and the crowd goes insane. Do you know how long people have wanted to see this? Not as much as Harry and Voldemort finally being face to face in a winner-takes-all combat though. Pretty much everything you've seen so far has led up to this. Not to mention the ending they gave to Severus Snape. Easily one of the best character arcs in cinema. A masterclass on how to build a character. You take a character and you make it as hateable as you can for the entire series, and then you make that character kill the most lovable character, and then wash away 7 films worth of hatred with a 5-minute montage. How poetic is it that the love that saved Harry from Voldemort that night became the reason for Snape's death? And then there's the pressure on David Yates to properly end it all and give fans around the world their final closure, which he did brilliantly. But while we're giving all the directors their due credit, let's not forget it was David Heyman, the producer, who made the choice of when to hire who. So, just goes to show, if you really want to call the shots in this business, you know who you want to be. It's also very important to note that the trio were pretty much playing themselves, not just at this point, but throughout these films. They were perfectly cast from the get-go and developed a deep connection, working together for a decade, and it shows and really translates well on screen. You as the audience truly believe that this is a group of friends that love and care for each other because they were. It's also impossible to not become a little bit of the character you play from childhood to adulthood. It's just genuine, and people really love seeing that. Potter and the gang finally defeat Voldemort and save the wizarding world. I mean, we knew it was going to happen, but boy did it feel good. And then he throws away the wand, saying it's too much power for any one person to have. Chosen one behavior, if you ask me. We can sit here all day and break down each and every little detail of who the director was or when the film came out and whatnot, but at the end of the day, these were movies that worked because they gave validation and encouragement to the weird kids. Kids that lived in their heads all day, imagining an entire world different from their own. A world you can escape to and be yourself in, no matter how goofy you are. In fact, the goofier the better. These were films where we could see our wildest imaginations as kids come to life, and yeah, it was just as beautiful as we thought it would be. Well, that's all for today, and until next time, I guess I'll see you at the movies.